We got one. Miami just landed a large people mover for the Great Wall of Mirabal from the 407 to the 305. Demetrius Campbell, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, folks, on this episode, we are going to talk about Miami committed quarterback Luke Nickel, how he's performing at the Elite 11 Finals, which is a big deal to have a quarterback commit at the Elite 11 Finals, the most prestigious quarterback camp. We're going to talk about the most competitive position battles that are coming up in fall practices for Miami. And folks, we're going to talk about Demetrius Campbell here in a second, but this is worth noting, okay? So last night, 7 o'clock, aka commitment o'clock at Miami, we get the announcement that Demetrius Campbell, big offensive tackle, has taken his talents to the U, but also you get the second most powerful man on the X app behind only Elon Musk, Dennis Smith, a.k.a. D-Train, from Miami's staff, sending this out there right after the Campbell commitment. He said, tonight is the beginning of a run. Tune in all week. Okay, coach, I got my popcorn ready. If we can get a commitment every single night, I would certainly take that, okay? So let's talk about the newest Miami Hurricanes verbal commit. Demetrius Campbell, I mentioned this guy, he is a people mover. And I think it's especially appropriate that he comes from Orlando. They got the people mover at Disney World. He's going to be moving people in the 305. 6'6", 300 pounds, three-star offensive lineman out of Orlando Christian Prep. He chooses the Miami Hurricanes over Rutgers, NC State, Ole Miss, and the hometown UCF. It was that official visit. Demetrius Campbell, not last weekend, but the weekend prior to that, his OV to Miami on the weekend of June 7th. That seems to be when the Hurricanes sealed the deal here. He canceled upcoming visits to NC State and Ole Miss. This is a player, Campbell, he's a little bit raw, which I think for Miami staff is a positive, because when you talk about being able to develop position groups, Coach Mirabal and Coach Cristobal, of course, are very proven when it comes to developing and churning out elite offensive linemen. And this is a guy I think they believe has the tools to become an elite offensive lineman. Campbell, multi-sport background. He grew up playing basketball. He's in a basketball family. He made the switch to football before his sophomore season in high school. That's when he actually transferred from a big basketball boarding school in Maine down to Orlando Christian. His older brother, Dom, is a high-level basketball player. Out of high school, he committed to play basketball at Notre Dame. He did transfer to Howard. I think Howard is where he is at now, but he's got that basketball background and basketball family. Now, Demetrius Campbell, again, he is considered to be a little bit raw because of his late start in football. Had a chance to watch some of his stuff playing left tackle for Orlando Christian Prep, and there's a lot to like there, folks. Obviously, elite size when you're talking about 6'6", 300 pounds plus, because he'll probably be over 300 by the time he actually starts his career here. He's got elite strength, very good footwork, and he also plays with a ton of motor and aggression. You really see this guy getting down the field, pancaking people. Attributes like these, again, they give him the building blocks that Coach Cristobal and Coach Mirabal really love. You see a little bit of Jalen Rivers in his game when you watch Demetrius Campbell playing high school football. So this is a 6'6" offensive tackle who has taken his talents verbally committed to the University of Miami. So again, D-Train says that this is the start of a run. And, for somebody like me who tries to make content every single freaking day, this is the start of a busy week now, busy midweek now when it comes to following Miami Hurricanes recruiting, and I cannot wait for it. So you have to beg the question, if we can expect more verbal commits later on this week. Who are the top candidates to be next at the University of Miami. There are a handful of Cristobal predictions that are currently out there. Demetrius Campbell was one of those Cristobal's that was out there, and he's taken his talents to the U. So who might be next? Well, Campbell was not the only very tall offensive lineman that the Hurricanes have recently been projected to land. There's also 6'6", 330-pound Jaden Wilkerson from another Orlando school. Orlando and Tampa, you notice, have been pretty good to Miami, at least for players Miami's in the running for, right? Because there's a bunch of Tampa recruits Miami's trying to land. So Central Florida has been better to Miami than it usually is. But Jaden Wilkerson out of Edgewater, which is a big program in Orlando, he's also recently been projected to pick the Hurricanes. And Wilkerson, he's actually announcing tonight. So that's a candidate. I can't say for sure if he's going to be picking Miami, but 2 Cristobal's for Wilkerson within the past week. He's announcing tonight at 6:45 p.m. If he can stretch that to 7, that would be commitment o'clock. He's going to be announcing on his Instagram live tonight. So I know Syracuse and Rutgers are also high on his list. So does he want to stay in the Sunshine State, or does he want to go to Syracuse, which is, some of the worst weather in the country? Rutgers, you can go to Tony Soprano. Did he go to Rutgers? I remember him talking about that on the show. That'd be, he's not even a real person, but that would be, I guess, Rutgers' most famous alumnus if he did in fact go there. So yeah, you have to watch out for Jaden Wilkerson tonight. Other Cristobal's that are hanging out there. Miami has a Cristobal to land defensive lineman Walter Mathis out of Savannah, Georgia, 6'3", 285 pounds. I don't necessarily think that a commitment there is imminent, but that is somebody Miami has gotten a Cristobal to land. And how about this one? I would love to see this player commit sometime soon. Miami does have a Cristobal from last week to land 4-star linebacker Gavin Nix out of IMG Academy, 6 foot, 225 pounds. People are always curious about wide receivers. And I know that a lot of folks out there are disappointed that Cortez Mills from Homestead is clearly trending away from Miami. He canceled his Miami official visit for this week. There's been a lot of buzz for Clemson. I've seen some people bring up maybe Oklahoma being a possibility now for Mills, but the buzz is trending away from Miami. So what about receivers? Miami definitely seems to have momentum with 4-star West Broward wide receiver Joshua Moore. He's someone, I love his size at 6'4", 205. Miami's also heavily recruiting other receivers like 5-star Jamie French, who had a midweek visit last week. Dallas Wilson, who had a weekend visit. He's an Oregon commit Miami's trying to flip. Miami has really made 4-star Vernell Brown a high priority. 3-star Tyler Williams, same thing. I think out of that group, the reports seem to indicate Miami might be farthest along right now with Joshua Moore. So I'm not necessarily saying he commits this week, but these are some players to watch that Miami could potentially be landed coming up. And, also we have another big official visit weekend coming up, final OV weekend of June coming up. And we'll talk more about who's going to be in town and what to expect. We still have so much to get to, folks. I am going to talk about the top position battles coming up in fall practices for Miami. Want to talk about some of the reviews that Miami committed quarterback Luke Nickel is getting at the most prestigious quarterback camp, the Elite 11 Finals. So you know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Folks, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. So, all right, guys, we talked about potentially being the start of a run, and you can expect more verbal commitments this coming week. We're staying tuned this week. We also have a big weekend of official visits coming up, final OV weekend of the month of June. Five-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa is going to be on campus for his OV. He was down here during spring football back in March. He's going to be OVing this weekend. Now, there's going to be a battle for Epenesa, okay? His family has ties to Iowa. He loved his recent visit to Utah. I was reading reports that apparently he's very high now on the Utes after making an OV there. So Miami really needs to raise the bar this weekend. And Epenesa is one of the absolute best edge recruits, defensive line recruits in this upcoming class. We've seen how, Miami had a lot of success with five-star defensive linemen in the last cycle, and also with specifically guys out of the state of Illinois, right? When you talk about Marquise Lightfoot and Justin Scott. So we'll see if history can repeat itself with Epenesa, but that's a big official visit coming up this weekend. Miami is going to be hosting four-star safety Hylton Drake Stubbs. He's a USC verbal commit. He's from Mandarin High School in Jacksonville. Miami would love to try to gain some momentum for a flip. Sometimes USC verbal commits can be a little flaky. I think they just lost somebody this week, so we'll see if Miami can gain some momentum with Stubbs. My favorite offensive lineman in this class, S.J. Alofaituli from Bishop Gorman in Vegas. He's going to be here for his OV. Hopefully his pal Elijah Lofton from Gorman can help sell him on Miami. I met SJ at the spring game. I think that was his first trip to Miami, was for the spring game for an unofficial. Now he's coming back for the official. Ben Hanks Jr., four-star corner out of Booker T. Washington. He's going to be here this weekend. Now, he's a Gators legacy, and 2 weekends ago, the Gators seemed to do really well with his official visit. Folks had been considering him a Miami lean before the month of June. Now, a lot of the momentum seems to be trending towards Florida. He was also weekend after he was at Florida, he was at UGA. So Miami is the former trending leader for him. Now Miami has the opportunity to bring some of that momentum back, getting Ben Hanks for his official visit. Again, his father played for Florida, so there's an obvious tie in there with the Gators, but he's also a South Florida kid playing at Booker T. Another important visit that's coming up, Elijah Melendez, Miami committed four-star linebacker, is coming. He's fresh off a visit to Oklahoma. Now, for those who have followed Elijah Melendez's recruitment, he's kept things very open despite his Miami pledge. So this weekend, the Hurricanes are going to try to lock things down with four-star linebacker Elijah Melendez out of Kissimmee. Another important visitor this weekend, Miami Central, four-star defensive lineman Randy Adarica is coming in. His top three schools, his recruitment is very national for Adarica. He's a local kid, but his top three schools are Penn State, USC, and Miami. That's not in any particular order, by the way. And he plans to make a decision at the end of the month, does Adarica. So Miami's going to be his last visit before verbal commitment, going to really try and make Miami favorites this coming weekend. So there are other visitors coming in. We'll talk about a few more throughout the week, but those are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight and spotlight heading into this very important weekend. We also get a related question here from one of our Locked On Canes insiders who wants me to rank the top must-gets in this cycle. He says not based on stars, but based on impact and morale. For example, he says, I think DJ Pickett is a must-get. He's not the highest rated, but keeping a legacy home would be huge. Well, he is the highest rated player in the state of Florida. I mean, if you talk about maybe the highest rated player that is considering Miami might be Elijah Griffin, the defensive lineman, but DJ Pickett, he's the best player in Florida, top defensive player, and he's at the top of my list. He's not technically a hometown guy, plays at Zephyr Hills in the Tampa area, but the ties that DJ Pickett has to the Miami program through his uncle and his cousins, not to mention, defensive back, cornerback is a position I believe Miami needs to really heavily recruit and win some important battles in this cycle to try and grab as many blue chip defensive backs for the future as you possibly can. DJ Pickett checks off every box when it comes to an important must-get recruit. So I'm going to put DJ at the top of my list as well. For similar reasons, I also put Chris Ewald Jr., 4-star cornerback out of Chaminade. I also put him very high on my list, an excellent player, position of need for Miami, and it's a high school that's a really valuable pipeline for Miami when you talk about Chaminade and just the amount of amazing local talent that they've been churning out in recent years. There are other ones that are maybe like not quite as pressing, some either ors for me. Like I think Miami really needs to get one of these blue chip, like tall receivers. I would say like getting one of a Dallas Wilson or Jamie French would be really important. Interior offensive line, I just mentioned S.J. Alofaituli is my favorite offensive lineman in the class. You need to get someone like him, hopefully him, or Isaac Sowles Jr. or Cortez Smith. I would take all three, don't get me wrong, but you need to grab somebody like that because I think it's really important to fortify your either guard or center for the future. Now, I'm also like, when I talk about grabbing a center for the future, I'm not sleeping on Nino Francavilla, who's the center that Miami has as a true freshman for this class. He had a good spring. People are pretty high on what he's doing. So I'm definitely not ruling him out as a long-term center of the future. Sometimes I sleep on him a little bit because he wasn't a blue chipper coming out of high school. Miami flipped him from Harvard. Okay. So he's an academic blue chipper. Is he a blue chipper on the field? That is yet to be seen. But he's been doing really well from the feedback that I get. So I'm not sleeping on Nino Francavilla, certainly. But, when you have an opportunity to grab guys who could play guard or center, like S.J. Alofaituli, I think that's a really important position to address. We get a question. I like this one a lot. What will be the best position battles coming up in fall camp, right? Because some of those were maybe partially settled in spring, but wars will be raging on in fall. And I am a firm believer, folks. Iron sharpens iron. Competition brings out the best in everybody. We had that awesome conversation yesterday with Melvin Bratton, who was two-time national championship winner at Miami, 83 and 87. He and Alonzo Highsmith were very close. Alonzo was starting over him early on in his career. And Mel said, like, he always told Alonzo, bro, if you get hurt, you better transfer. Like, if you get injured, you better transfer because you're not getting your starting spot back from me. That's the sort of competition. And by the way, they loved each other. It was a brotherhood, but that's the sort of heated competition that I want to have at Miami. And so we're going to have some position battles coming up in, I say fall practices. They start at the end of July, so it's not really fall, but you know what I mean. I think third wide receiver, there could be a good battle between Isaiah Horton and the transfer Sam Brown from Houston. That should be one to watch. Since I haven't seen Brown in person yet, I can't handicap that competition, but I have seen Isaiah Horton both in games last year and on the field in spring, and Horton looks ready to break out. Now, Brown has more experience. He's played more than Horton, so he's put up more stats, but Horton is trending upwards. So the competition between those two, because I would assume Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George probably have a starting spot locked down. Sam Brown and Isaiah Horton, they might both play a lot, but whoever emerges as the starter there is going to be one to watch. Some of these are not necessarily starting job battles, like third running back. I would assume Damian Martinez is running back one. Mark Fletcher, if he's hopefully healthy for the start of the season, is running back two. But then third running back between Chris Johnson, A.J. Allen, possibly Jordan Lyle, who's doing really well in offseason workouts as a true freshman. That's going to be one to watch. Going back to a starting job battle, left guard, Matthew McCoy and Samson Okunlola. They're going to have competition for that spot. That's going to go into the fall. So I can't wait to see what happens there. Defensive tackle. So I project Simeon Barrow and CJ Clark to start. Barrow, because of his pedigree coming out of Michigan State. This guy was a Big Ten starter and a darn good one. Haven't seen him in person yet, though, at Miami. But I pencil him in as a starter. Probably CJ Clark, who transferred from NC State. However, guys like Marley Cook, Ahmad Moten, Anthony Campbell, Josh Horton, maybe even some of the freshmen. We'll see what Justin Scott can do. Some of these freshmen can push these guys. So there's going to be competition along the interior and the exterior of that defensive line, right? Because again, at the edge rusher positions, there's a lot of great talent there. Reuben Bain, Tyler Barron. I would assume Bain's probably going to start, but Barron, Elijah Alston, Akeem Mesidor. I think my guy Malik Bryant can push people. There's some talented freshmen there, so there's a lot of competition. Also, I would say cornerback. Daryl Porter is a starter, but on the other side, there could be competition between Damari Brown and Jadis Richard. So there's a lot of undecided stuff. Obviously, you know what you got when it comes to starters at positions like quarterback, running back, tight end. I think is Elijah Arroyo. Hopefully he can stay healthy this year. You know, you have 4 of your 5 offensive line starters are set, but there's a lot of competition coming up in fall camp, and I absolutely cannot wait for it. Okay. Our guy Luke Nickel is out there, hopefully turning heads at the Elite 11 finals in Los Angeles. We'll talk about that when we come back. You know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Shout out to the everydayers who make us your first listen and your first watch each and every day. By the way, Locked On Canes, we're available free wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure to subscribe. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, sign up for our exclusive text messaging service. I include the link in the show description below for you to become a Locked On Canes insider. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, recruiting scoops, show previews and updates, one-on-one questions and answers. We already answered a couple questions there from our Locked On Canes insiders. So become a member. You could try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value. Link below to become a Locked On Canes insider. So, you know, it's funny because based on which, and I wish I was out there in Los Angeles for the Elite 11 finals. We're going to talk more about it tomorrow, actually, with Brian Smith, our recruiting overlord, is going to join us for this. But I'm relying on some reviews out there. Like some of these guys are not really talking a whole lot about Luke Nickel, but the ones who are, in some of the clips that I've seen, you get the sense that Nickel is actually, he doesn't necessarily have the highest ceiling out of the quarterbacks that are out there, but the floor is really high. And I've seen him described by multiple reporters as someone who looks relatively ready to play immediately compared to the other quarterbacks out there. Like Luke Nickel, who really excels with his accuracy and his quick release. And there's some intangibles there as well with Nickel, something we've talked about on the show. Everywhere this dude plays, he wins. Every 7-on-7 team he plays on, he's winning titles, national titles and 7-on-7s. Wins a state championship in Georgia, in the highest classification in Georgia. Wins a state championship with his high school team, Milton High School. Like Luke Nickel, not only does this guy look good, look polished, but he wins everywhere he plays, which I think is something important, and it's something that's a little harder to measure tangibly, of course. But here's a review from 24/7 Sports' Greg Biggins on Luke Nickel at Elite 11 finals. He says Nickel has a refined game and an advanced feel for the position. He's comfortable out of the gun or taking a drop, showed good feet, got plenty of depth, and always looked on balance with his throws. He was comfortable throwing off platform, throws a consistent tight ball, and has plenty of arm, he says. He was one of the more polished quarterbacks in the camp today and looked like one of the more quote-unquote ready-to-play early signal callers as well. And by the way, when I talked earlier about, we got that question about must-get recruits, obviously Luke Nickel is in that category. Now, I didn't put him out there because Luke, not only is Luke verbally committed to Miami, but he shut down the rest of his recruitment. He's still been contacted by schools like Florida State and South Carolina, but he shut everything down. He's not taking other visits. He knows Miami is the spot for him. And I think Luke Nickel is going to be a star with the Hurricanes. And when you talk about that ready to play thing, you have to wonder how quickly is he going to get in the mix here? Because, of course, this year, and Nickel's not going to get on campus until, after this upcoming football season. Miami has got 1 year of Cam Ward, where I have high expectations for what Ward's going to do in his one-and-done season with Miami. And then after that, you're you're talking about probably a battle between Reese Poffenbarger and Emory Williams. Now, there are variables there. A variable is Miami could decide to go out and get another transfer if they feel like there's an opportunity to get another Cam Ward type through the portal, or you can allow your existing talent to compete for the job, which in this case would be Reese Poffenbarger and Emory Williams. And then you have to wonder, could Nickel get into that mix as a true freshman? I don't think he should. I would rather allow him take a redshirt year. But then the following season, if Poffenbarger does start next year, 2025, he would be a one and done because that would be his final. Well, he 2 years here, but one and done as a starter because next year is his final year of eligibility. And then could Nickel potentially be ready to be a starter as a redshirt freshman the following year? So I could see maybe 2026. I wouldn't like him to be the starter in 2025 because I'd like him to sit and get some seasoning. That's just me. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of handing the keys to a true freshman unless he's got just maybe he does, but just extraordinary maturity. Maybe Nickel does have that, but I'd probably prefer him to sit a year and get that experience. So you have to wonder how early he could be ready for that. Well, folks, I want you guys to make sure you subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to the audio version. And D-Train says we're going to be busy this week. He said what happened last night, landing Demetrius Campbell, was the beginning of a run to tune in all week. So if I can expect more verbal commitments, that means more episodes, more emergency episodes. So we will keep you guys updated throughout the week. We will talk to you again tomorrow or maybe later tonight on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.